All week long, we have seen and heard mass murderer Richard Speck living a life of drugs, sex, and good times while in prison. But while he was having fun, the families of the 8 nurses he murdered were in agony. Now, 30 years after the murders, those families are talking about their pain. Bill Kurtis joins us with more of Richard Speck Speaks. Bill?
It's true, Lester. For 5 nights, we've examined the Richard Speck crimes, the manhunt, and his life in the big house. Tonight, how over the years that he spent at Stateville, he kept on killing.
My dad and I drove into Chicago and went to the county morgue.
In July of 1966, John Schmale lost his sister Nina at the hands of Richard Speck.
I can still picture the weather and where I parked the car, and there were all these TV cameras and photographers, and it was a zoo.
30 years later, the memories still bite.
They put all the family into a separate room, and then one by one they took the family members out. He went to a viewing room to identify the body, and then you just went home. And
8 families came to a Peoria courthouse looking for some measure of justice, a salve for their pain. On April 15th, 1967, they got it. It took the jury barely 45 minutes to come back with a verdict. Guilty on 8 counts of murder. Speck's attorney, Gerald Getty, had never had a client sentenced to die. According to Speck, he tried every maneuver in the legal book to keep that record intact.
Have you ever tried to commit suicide?
No, that's bullshit. That's propaganda stuff that Gerald Getty used in the courtroom to try to get sympathy from the jurors so they wouldn't give me the death sentence.
Like much of what the killer says, that's a lie. Speck did attempt suicide. In his sentencing hearing, that attempt was ignored by his defense, but seized upon by the prosecution as overwhelming evidence of guilt. On June 5th, 1967, Judge Herbert Passion agreed and sentenced the killer to die in Illinois' electric chair. Given a chance, the cops who put him on death row would have done the job themselves.
Well, all I can say is that if we would have caught up with Speck first, there would have been no need for an inquest or a trial. All we'd have is just an inquest on him, and that'd be the end of Richard Speck.
But that was far from the end for Speck. In 1972, he escaped execution. His sentence commuted to life. Good evening. 10 years after murdering 8 student nurses in a South Side townhouse, Richard Speck had his first parole hearing today.
When they commuted the death penalty, I thought that it meant that he would have life in prison. I had no idea that despite the fact he'd murdered 8 nurses, that he was up for parole within 7 years.
While Richard Speck enjoyed a life of drugs, sex, and good times behind bars, John Schmale got to relive the nightmare. 7 parole hearings in all, 7 chances for the families to cut their wounds fresh.
It's so traumatic to have to go to Joliet, and you have to go through a shakedown, and it makes you so angry that the state of Illinois could even be considering, why are we even talking about this man should go out on parole?
And you have religious people have come up to me and said, if you don't do something about him, we will. We'll cut him into pieces with a razor blade.
As the years rolled on, the parole hearings continued, but there were fewer and fewer family members there to protest. Within 5 years of the murders, at least 4 parents would die. A decade later, nearly all had passed away. Even in jail, it seems, Richard Speck had found a way to kill.
Richard Speck, one of Chicago's most notorious criminals, is dead.
On December 5th, 1991, Richard Speck died of a heart attack. Ironically, a medical crew worked for more than 4 hours to try and save his life.
When he died, for me anyway, there was a closure, and it wasn't a happy event or anything like that. It was just finally, well, there's no more parole hearings. He doesn't have my sister's picture in his jail cell anymore. This is over with.
During the past week, we've been deluged with inquiries about the Speck tapes, and more specifically, the killer's stunning account of the night of the murders. Tomorrow, we'll replay Speck's confession. And Sunday at 10, an even more incredible story. For the first time, details about a post-mortem performed on Richard Speck's brain. and some startling new evidence that shows he may very well have been a natural-born killer.
You didn't even know that such a post-mortem had been done.
Never before known. We found out as a result of some reaction to these reports that we have been doing, but scientifically, there will be some astounding findings.
We'll see that on Sunday.
Sunday night.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.